Russian President Vladimir Putin sends his army on a death march in Ukraine. The main goal is to capture as much territory as possible before peace talks. For this reason, the generals are preparing to sacrifice even more Russian soldiers. But in the end, this could also lead to serious protests in Russian society. So, Russia has dramatically stepped up military action on the Ukrainian front, advancing at its fastest pace this year and launching record-breaking missile and drone strikes. The Kremlin appears to have already launched a summer offensive, although it has not officially acknowledged it. The New York Times reports. Military analysts confirm that Moscow has launched a large-scale offensive campaign, despite the fact that the first direct peace talks with Ukraine since 2022 have resumed in parallel. The attack on the Sumy region has opened a new northern front, and in the east, in the Donbas region, Russia is slowly but surely advancing, despite heavy losses on both sides. Russia has used the winter lull to stockpile equipment, update tactics and ramp up drone production, analysts say. Just last week, the Russians attacked Ukrainian cities with hundreds of drones and missiles, the largest combined strike since the full-scale invasion began. Some of the munitions penetrated Ukrainian air defenses, damaging industrial and civilian targets. Although the Kremlin has not directly announced the start of a new phase of the offensive, Vladimir Putin has spoken of creating a buffer zone to protect Russia from Ukrainian shelling. He has also hinted again that the war will continue until the root causes of the conflicts are eliminated, that is, until Ukraine capitulates on Moscow's terms. Against this backdrop, the resumption of peace talks, particularly in Istanbul, looks contradictory. RAND analysts and a number of European experts say that the Kremlin is using the offensive not only as a tool of pressure, but also to gain an advantage until a potential pause in hostilities. At the same time, Kiev and the EU are convinced that Putin is not interested in a diplomatic settlement, but is striving for victory in the war. The invasion of the Sumy region, according to analysts, has already attracted thousands of Ukrainian troops, limiting the ability to defend Donbas. At the same time, Russia's ability to carry out a large-scale occupation remains limited. Its resources are not unlimited, although the Kremlin is increasing its weapons production. According to political scientist Samuel Charap, the current escalation is a typical example of fight and talk. Russia is trying to take the maximum on the battlefield before the guns fall silent. As reported, Russia is preparing a large-scale escalation on the front in the summer of 2025. The main strikes are expected in the area of Konstantinovka and Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has revealed the goals of Russia's summer offensive. He noted that the Russians are amassing forces in the Sumy direction and are not changing their goals regarding offensive actions in the east and south of Ukraine. The US president made it clear that Putin is playing with fire by refusing to agree to a ceasefire and sit down at the negotiating table with Ukraine. The head of the White House is also disappointed by Putin's indifference to restoring the former relations between the countries after the agreement with Ukraine was concluded, Politico reports. One of the US presidential administration officials made it clear that Putin is simply burning the golden bridge that Trump laid to him. According to American officials, Trump does not yet know what to do next, whether to impose sanctions against Russia or not. Now, Brussels is also racking its brains over this issue. The EU is pondering the question of how to help Ukraine even more if Trump does withdraw from the negotiating process. Trump constantly threatens Russia with a response to its inaction in terms of the negotiation process, but in reality things have not gone beyond threats. During the US president's conversation with European leaders, the head of the White House again tried to justify Putin for his unwillingness to participate in peace negotiations. Trump also admitted that he was disappointed with Putin's actions, but at the same time, he did not want to introduce new sanctions against Russia in the hope of still persuading the Russian president to sit down at the negotiating table. Against this backdrop, many Republicans began to promote the idea of introducing sanctions to punish Russia. Some political scientists note that the Kremlin wants to separate the issue of the war in Ukraine and the establishment of relations with the United States. Over time, many Republicans began writing their own posts in support of Trump and his policies. One of them was Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. On his social media page, he wrote how much he appreciates everything Trump is doing to try to stop the war. However, to achieve this goal, partners must also strive for this. Putin has not yet shown such readiness. Graham reminded everyone that during the Assad regime in Syria, it was Putin who encouraged the military to drop bombs on the country's civilians and attack hospitals. A similar picture can now be seen in Ukraine. This is the old tactic of Putin's Russia. The senator said, escalation for the sake of de-escalation, as well as stalling for time in the hope that other countries will lose all interest in the conflict. However, these days the situation itself has changed and Putin's scenario will no longer work. After this, Graham addressed the Russians. The senator said that Putin was leading the Russian Federation into the abyss. Over the 3 years of war, many Russian servicemen were killed and wounded. Russia, more than ever, is very isolated from the outside world. This situation does not make Russia a great country, but on the contrary, a pariah state. However, Russians can achieve more if they want. The Kremlin's recent attacks on Ukraine once again prove that Putin is not interested in peace and is a bloodthirsty tyrant. Other Republicans also supported Trump. Michael McCall emphasized that Putin wants to get all of Ukraine, which is why he supports the introduction of new sanctions against Russia. Don Bacon said it was time to end the war in Ukraine. Russia must be held accountable, and long-term US national interests must be advanced in the process. The stakes are too high to hesitate, the Republican said.